Growing up, my mom always said there were all types of people in the world. If me or my brother would be judging someone else or saying how strange someone was, she would always say, if we were all the same, the world would be a boring place. My mom didn't give me a lot of great advice over the years, but I will say I loved that, and I still wholeheartedly agree. I never understood people who seemed to want everyone to be the same, or who only hung out with different versions of themselves. How boring. I think I liked what she said so much because I was one of those different people. I was someone that people said, "How strange" about. I had always been different, and other than going through a short phase as an adolescent when I tried to become more normal, I embraced my eccentricities. After all, my originality was just keeping the world more interesting. Growing up was a little painful for me. My brother was a superstar in every way, in sports, in his grades, in his popularity, and most of all, in my mother's eyes. Kieran was perfect. He was good looking too, just like my mom. I looked more like my dad, who had left years before, and was very much less than perfect. My brother constantly had friends over, boys and girls, and I tried to hang out and be cool, but it wasn't my nature. Kieran was nice enough, and so were his friends, but as soon as I was in a room with more than 2 people, I would completely clam up. I had always been that way. Awkward was my middle name. I didn't have any friends of my own, never had. It was the same thing. One-on-one, I could handle it. But as a kid, how many times are you alone with one other friend? There are always lots of people around, and if you clam up around more than one person at a time, you've got problems. I accepted in elementary school that I wasn't going to be a person with lots of friends. I craved a bestie, but knew it wasn't in the cards. It's not like I'd be able to find a friend who was happy to just stay my friend and not want to ever hang out in a group just because I couldn't. When it came to thinking of boyfriends, I didn't even go there. That would never happen for me. I was sure of it. When my mom lost her job, we fell on hard times. We had to move to a 2-bedroom apartment, which meant me sharing a room with my brother. It wasn't the worst thing in the world, but that apartment was pretty awful. We did our best to not show our disgust when my mom showed it to us. We could tell she was trying to hold it together, and that it was all she could afford. The curtains were threads holding hands. The flooring was filthy. Carpet was speckled with stains everywhere. There was a smell I wasn't sure I could stomach. And I couldn't help but notice a cockroach go scuttling behind the fridge. I suppressed a shiver, plastered on a smile, and said, "We can make it nice. You'll see, Mom." My mom pulled both of us in close and told us how much she loved and appreciated us. She said we could face anything together, and down deep, I knew she was right. As much as I missed out on having friends, I was so happy to have this little family unit where I knew I had a place. We decided to spend a day cleaning the place before we moved in. We stripped the curtains and threw them out. I scoured secondhand shops to find decent ones to replace them with. Kieran and his friends rented a carpet cleaner and started working on the carpets and floors, while my mom took to scrubbing those yellowed walls. I was pulling the fridge out from the wall to try and clean behind it when a cockroach came scuttling out again. I knew I was supposed to find them gross and that they were a sign of filth, but I couldn't help but feel sorry for them. They were here first, after all, and it was their home. My mom saw the cockroach and said she would use the last of what she had left in her account to call in an exterminator. That afternoon, I set about catching all the cockroaches I could find. I had decided that they had deserved a chance to live, and I had always wanted a pet. I found a box, camouflaged it so it didn't look like a critter box, and started the big roundup. I was able to catch 3. So I had 3 little pets in my shoebox. I talked to them when there was no one home. I named them and adored them. I researched what they ate and how to care for them, and those critters had it easy. I would love coming home from school before anyone else so I could take them out and let them crawl on my hands and arms. I would quickly put them back in the box and slide it under my bed when I could hear the sounds of footsteps on the stairs leading up to our apartment. The more time I spent in that apartment, the more my mom and brother worried about me. One night, when they thought I was sleeping, I could hear them talking in hushed tones in the living room. I could hear my brother, "Mom, she's just weird. She has no friends, comes straight home after school, when all the other kids are playing and hanging out, and she just hangs out in this tiny apartment. It's not healthy." My mom sighed and said, "I know, I've been worried too. She's always been a loner, but seems to have really isolated herself more lately. What do you think she does in here by herself after school every day?" My brother just shrugged and said, "I don't know. The TV's never on when I walk in, and she certainly isn't talking to anyone." I made a mental note to try and appear more normal before they really started digging into how I was spending my time. The next day, I didn't rush home after school like I normally did. I went to the park and sat on the swings by myself. I stayed until I knew my brother and mom would be home already, and then sauntered up the stairs. My mom and brother looked shocked when I walked through the door. "Where have you been?" they both said at the same time, looking at each other after. "I went for a walk and then ran into someone I knew, so we hung at the park for a while," I said as casually as I could. I figured the words sounded as unnatural as they felt coming out of my mouth when I said them, and saw how surprised and pleased my little family seemed. I went into the room and closed the door. I slowly pulled out my box and peered inside. My pets were safe and sound, and my secret was protected. I made an effort to disappear for a couple hours after school a few times a week, and would tell my brother and mom the same thing, that I had made a friend and was hanging out at the park like other kids my age. They both seemed very relieved. One day I had come home early, and for some reason, didn't hear my brother coming up the stairs early from work. Before I had the chance to push the box back under the bed, he was already standing in the doorway staring at me with my pets crawling on my arms aghast. He said, "What on earth are you doing with those?" I told him that they were my pets and were completely harmless. He backed out of the room and closed the door behind him. I put the lid on the box and went out to talk to him. "What's so weird about it?" I asked. "Lots of people have pets." "Yeah, like fluffy and cute kittens and dogs maybe, but not cockroaches for God's sake." I said, "Hey, you heard Mom. I'm just keeping the world interesting, being different from everyone else." He laughed at that and said, "Well, it's definitely different, all right." My brother warned me he had to tell my mom about it, and I told him I figured he would. That night, I could hear them talking in hushed tones again, but I was surprised when they called me out to join them. My mom started with, "I hear you have an interesting little secret." She didn't seem too mad about it, which I was relieved about. I told them how it started and how I liked them and they made me happy. My mom said she understood and was the last to judge. To my great surprise, she said, "I have an idea. If you're going to do this, let's do it right." The next day, she took me down to the pet store and let me choose an actual glass cage to upgrade from. My cardboard box was too small and too easy for them to escape from, she said with a shudder at the thought. At that moment, I realized I had the best mom and family in the world. We had no white picket fence, nor did we have a palatial home. But I had a place I could really be myself, and people who would love me regardless. To watch more animated story videos like this, hit that subscribe button. And tell us in the comments section what you thought about this story.